Hey everyone, another day, another review. What do you say we talk about the Thomas & Friends Wooden Railway Day of the Diesels mystery packaging? Now, these were in stores around the year 2011, which was when Day of the Diesels was released, and this is a very unique Thomas & Friends Wooden Railway item. The story behind these is that for some reason when Day of the Diesels came out, Learning Curve shipped a bunch of these, what I guess I classify as like a blind bag toy. They shipped a bunch of these to toy stores. And the whole idea here is the toy stores were not supposed to sell them. They were supposed to either give them away in some sort of promotion, or I don't really know the details. But basically what ended up happening is Learning Curve sent a bunch of these to toy stores, and then a toy store near me, a local toy store that I've been going to since I was a kid, about a year ago, so like March 2017, this toy store ended up closing. And you know, when you're doing a store closing like that, basically anything extra you have in the back you bring up to the front, and this toy store had a plethora of these Day of the Diesel mystery type box packaging things that they were selling. So I might go into that story a little bit later. That's just the main gist of it. But these were sold, or I shouldn't say sold, they were available for purchase, but not really purchased because you couldn't sell them. They were just available around the year 2011, and there were 4 different types of engines that you could find in this blind bag toy. You could get Thomas, Percy, Salty, or Diesel. And what's unique about these engines is they had these oil splattered details on them. So they're not like your normal Thomas and Friends toys. They're a little bit different, but nonetheless, since this toy store was having like a massive store closing clearance sale, I ended up being able to buy these. Yes, I did have to end up buying them, even though that says they're not for resale. This one right here says $5. That's what they were originally listed for, and this toy store had about, I'd say, pretty close to 100 of these laying about in these shopping carts that they had in one of their main aisles. I bought a few of these when they were 25% off. I bought several more when they were 50% off, and then I think for a very short time they were 75% off. So you're probably wondering, if these are blind bag toys, how do you know that each of these is going to contain a different engine? Well, I did sort of a sneaky thing while I was in the store. This back panel here, or flap, used to have some glue or adhesive on it. It's kind of worn off because these are over like 5-7 years old at this point. And if you just kind of peel it back, you can kind of see what color wheels are inside there, and that's a big clue. So obviously Thomas has blue wheels, Percy has green wheels. It gets a little bit harder to decipher between these two. So I have 4 of these mystery type packaging, or boxes slash packages here, and I know for a fact that all of these contain a different engine. However, I don't know which one is where. So I guess we'll open this one up and see what's inside. I mean, look how easy that comes apart. All right, so our first Day of the Diesel's mystery type engine that we're going to unbox is Salty here. So this was, introduced back in 2011. Since then, especially in the year 2015, blind bag packaging slash toys has come a long way. There's even a brand of Thomas merchandise. The Thomas Minis are all about blind bag toys. I don't think this should become a thing. I'm actually very glad that Learning Curve decided not to sell them in stores, because a Mini in the United States is about $1 to $2. These, for this size engine, would be between about $11 and $15. So you're playing with a lot more money here. But regardless, I'll move this packaging aside and let's take a look at our first mystery engine. It is technically called Dirty Salty. And as you can see, it has, I guess those are oil splatters. It's supposed to be a scene from the movie, I'm guessing. I haven't seen Day of the Diesels in a really long time. But since these are from 2011, if you know anything about the Thomas Wooden Railway line during this time, the characters do not have the best faces. For some reason, Learning Curve tried, well, I shouldn't say for some reason, at least they tried, but this is Learning Curve's rendition of a CGI Salty face. It's not good in my opinion, and actually, to be quite frank, it's quite scary. It's basically your normal Salty model with some oil splattered designs on the side here. So that detailing is nice, but the face is not. The face is very creepy in my opinion. So that's probably what this era is unfortunately best known for. The 2011-2012 Learning Curve slash Tomy era. They just had these really awful CGI faces that were fortunately replaced very quickly when Mattel came along, but nonetheless, they live on in this sort of blind bag packaging that you see here. So Salty feels like a quality toy. I mean, there's nothing that indicates to me that, anything is broken. He's been sitting around for 7 years or so. But anyway, there's Salty. I don't really know what else to say. I just really don't like the face, so I'm going to try to show that as few as possible, basically. Anyway, Dirty Salty. I guess I'll move on to the next one because I don't really know what else to say. But a really cool part about the learning curve items from this time, all of the engines had this really nice glossy paint. And I sort of think it not only made the engines look shinier, obviously, but it sort of was like a barrier of protection. So even though learning curve at this point probably wasn't too into the Thomas Wooden Railway line, in fact they were looking to sell it, they still did a very good job with their toys, design-wise, build-wise. Up until the very end, their faces are a different story. So let me move Salty out of the way. Like I said, I don't know which engines are in which packaging. I think I'll just go over here. So the toy store that I bought these from, I've been going there since I was a kid. It was really sad to see the store close, but it was the type of store, it was actually like an educational store that had a toy section. It's basically a store where teachers would go to buy like motivational posters and that sort of thing. And so every time I went into the store, there was hardly like anybody in there. So I knew it was just a matter of time before it ended up closing. But nonetheless, it was really sad. I went in there for the last time I think about a week or two before it closed because I was going out of town. But it was nice. I had a chat with the owner. He sort of implied that they were getting pushed out because like somebody wanted the space and they were, I don't know, like, they kind of got outbid on their lease. But since then, nothing else has moved into that store location, which is a bit interesting. So here we have Percy. And I'm guessing he's named Dirty Percy underneath. And he just has that awful CGI face. But he has some really good detailing on the sides here. This era of Percy was always like super bright to me. I guess the Mattel Percy is pretty close in color, but I still think, for some reason, I think this Percy, they nailed the color really nicely. Just got those oils, splotches, or splatches, whatever you want to call them, and a not so good face. I don't really know what else to say because I don't have a whole lot of engines from this era. In fact, I literally have like none. So I mean, just based on like, my previous handling of learning curve items, it feels the same. It's not like these are stickers or anything. It's actually like painted on there, which is really nice. So that's Percy. All right, so now we're down to Thomas or Diesel. And I think, I'm not really sure. I think I'll go here. I honestly don't know what order I put them in. I just made sure when I bought these and I put them away in a secure location, I made sure that I had 4 of each. So if that last box back there ends up being like another Diesel, I'm going to be in big trouble. But anyway, we have Diesel here. This is actually the only one of these engines from this era of Thomas and Friends Wooden Railway where the face actually doesn't look that bad. In fact, if you watch my series, I actually use this style of Diesel because I like that grumpy face. I'm not a big fan of the Mattel happy face. So that face, in my opinion, looks a lot like Diesel. It looks like Series 7 onwards Diesel, if that makes sense, but it's a grumpy Diesel face, and I like that. So we have Dirty Diesel here, nice alliteration. And yeah, he has just the same types of detailing. It doesn't look like it's been just like copy and pasted over from model to model. It's a little bit different here and there, which is nice. You can kind of see, where the splotches are and how they differ. So there is a little bit of variation, which is nice. And like I said, I'm actually a big fan of this version of Diesel. So I shouldn't say that all of the 2011, 2012 Learning Curve Tomy versions are bad, but like 90% of them are for sure. So there's Diesel. I like the face, and I actually have a clean version, a non-dirty version that I use in my series. It's actually this type. So there at the bottom, it has that pertains to like recall codes in case there's a problem, and then it says Learning Curve brand. So there you go. So in sort of an unpredicted twist of fate, we have Thomas being last here. I sure hope it's Thomas. Yes, okay, I didn't mess up. And since that store went out of business a year ago, these have just been sitting around since then because I knew I was either going to unbox them in like a mass unboxing video or I would do a Thomas Wooden Railway discussion on them, which is what I ended up doing. So here we have Thomas, and please shut your eyes if you don't like scary images. This is, I miss Learning Curve, because I felt like they did a good job, like quality-wise, with the trains. But I'm really happy Mattel took over when they did, because I don't know if I could live. I mean, imagine if the CGI face on Thomas was still like that today. Hopefully they would have corrected it by then. But here we see, let me bring over Percy. Yeah, they did actually a very nice job with varying the splotchiness where the oil splatter is supposed to be. I don't remember a specific scene from Day of the Diesels where all 4 of these engines get covered in oil. Maybe it's just supposed to, I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I can imagine Diesel and Salty being covered in oil, maybe even Percy, since he spends a decent amount of time of the movie at the Diesel Works. But actually, the version of Thomas from Day of the Diesels that I remember is the one where he's covered in ash and soot from the fire at the beginning of the movie. So I really don't know. I mean, it seems like a very weird variation of engine to produce across these 4 characters. But, I mean, I wasn't super into Thomas at this time. It was 2011, so I had a YouTube account. But I was never really up to par with the movies that were being released. I was never into them. I was still very much into the classic Thomas Wooden Railway, that sort of thing. So, in terms of how ugly these faces are, I mean, I'd say there's a pretty good tie. I mean, I think Thomas's face is the worst offender by far. Percy just looks really chubby to me. Let's see about Salty. Salty's pretty bad, but the clear winner, in my opinion, with the least appalling face, actually a pretty good face in my opinion, is Diesel there. So here are, let me just put them all in the shot here. Here are the 4, basically what I'm calling the mystery Day of the Diesel engines that were only available, I believe, in these mystery type boxes. I know they released a set at the very end of the Learning Curve era. They released a set that featured these 4 same engines, but I don't believe they were oil splattered. It was a very unique set that actually featured like 4 giant hills and an intersection and a bunch of switches and straight track. And it was just a weird set because I saw it once at Toys R Us and then I never saw it again. And I actually didn't see it for a long time until I saw it pop up on eBay a few years ago. So these engines, I mean, if you're a Day of the Diesels fan or if you like to collect specific versions of the engines out there, then yeah, these engines are like right up your alley. But in terms of like the casual Thomas Wooden Railway collector, I mean, these are honestly pretty forgettable, especially because of their faces. I really don't like the faces on them. I don't think they're very good at all, with the exception of Diesel here. So in terms of, you know, these guys' lasting legacy in the Thomas Wooden Railway line, they really don't have a legacy. I mean, they're kind of honestly forgotten. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some people out there watching this video that weren't Thomas fans back in the Day of the Diesels era from 2011 that didn't even know these guys existed. What is unique, however, is none of the engines have oil splatters on their back. I wonder why that is. That's weird. They have them on the sides. I mean, they don't have them on the front. I'm just trying to think of some like simple things they could have done to make these engines more appealing. Obviously, better faces. Maybe if they put some of that oil grime on their faces, would that have made them more appealing? Or maybe even like different expressions, like a shocked expression. Like Percy's like, oh, like my paint's all dirty. Maybe that would have been better. These are honestly just the normal CGI Learning Curve versions of these characters with some extra paint detailing on the side. That's what it really comes down to. So overall, these are nice considering I bought them for roughly $2.50 a piece. I mean, I can't really remember back in the day when these were the brand new thing, when Day of the Diesels was out, what the situation was. I remember seeing them at Toys R Us though, and I want to say they had a promotion going on where if you bought a certain amount of merchandise, like $50 or $75 worth, you got one of these for free. I want to say that's the whole idea behind this promotion, because remember, they weren't for sale. So I don't know how well that went. Obviously, that toy store that I went to that closed down, they had a ton of these in the back, so they never bothered to give them away individually, or they did give away some of them, but they still had a ton laying around. So it just goes to show you, you know, the amount of clutter and the amount of stuff that I'm sure a bunch of toy stores have in their back. Like there was another train store that ended up closing near me. They've actually reopened in a different place. But when they were doing like their store clearance sale, I should say, they brought out some new in box water towers from like the early 2000s that they had in the back. And the reason they were in the back is because all of the water had evaporated from them. So they didn't really want to sell them, but then since they were getting rid of everything, I think they sold them for $10 each, and I bought like every single one. Because I'm thinking, I can totally use that in my series or something like that. So anyway, I'm glad, if I can take a moment, we can just kind of let these mystery engines sit here for a second. I'm glad that this style of blind bag boxing / packaging didn't continue into the Thomas Wooden Railway range full time. I don't think it's very fair to the consumer to try and charge them, you know, this type of engine, a non-Thomas Wood engine that's fully painted, this would go for between $11 and $15. So trying to get all four of those, that's like $48, $50 at least with tax on there. And then you make a few mistakes because you honestly, I mean, you can't see through this packaging here. They did a really good job making it like non-see-through, but you know, there's obviously ways to exploit the system, and you can take a flashlight and look underneath too. But you make a few mistakes, you're into like the $60, $70 range there pretty quickly, and that's an expensive mistake. Whereas if you mess up with one of the Thomas Minis, that's like $2 maximum. So I'm glad this isn't a thing. I sure hope it doesn't become a thing. But very interesting. I'll just note that again, these were not for sale. They were supposed to be like promotional or giveaway type engines. But since the store that these were from, since they were closing, and since Learning Curve doesn't really have any authority over Thomas and Friends Wooden Railway anymore, or Thomas and Friends Wood for that matter, they sold them and they made a nice $5, or for me they made $2.50 off of them. So I thought these were extremely unique item. Definitely the only type of blind bag Thomas and Friends Wooden Railway toy we've ever seen before. Hopefully the only one we'll ever see, but nonetheless it's still kind of a cool part of Thomas and Friends history. So there we have the four engines. I want to thank everybody for watching this video, and I think we can all agree that the faces on these toys here are not the best, but you know, quality wise they do feel like a quality Learning Curve product. So I guess I'll leave it at that. Thanks everybody so much for watching. Just leave your reaction and your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next Thomas Wooden Railway discussion.